Construction, construction, construction. In a country reeling from the fallout of another seemingly endless war and terrorizing impacts of the largest mass deportation campaign in American history, and the extraordinary pain caused by the rich continuing to get richer while the poor get poorer, we are sure as hell talking a lot about the president's obsession with construction. On Friday, the Trump administration asked the Supreme Court to intervene in the ongoing legal challenge to the construction of the White House ballroom, and just a couple miles away, the board of the Kennedy Center, packed with Trump loyalists, voted once again to inscribe Trump's name on the building. I swear to you, really, as part of Trump's renovation of the living memorial to President Kennedy. I forgive you if you are confused. I was confused too. I saw them taking it down. Remember? Back in May, a federal judge ordered Trump's name be taken off the Kennedy Center. And when I heard this, I wanted to make sure I wasn't tripping out of my mind when I was standing in front of that ugly tarp. Turns out I wasn't. So now, after a new vote by the Kennedy board, it will be the John F. Kennedy Memorial Center for the Performing Arts, restored and renovated by President Donald J. Trump. So lame. Kennedy by Trump. The collab that no one wanted. Our nation's capital has become an HGTV show that nobody voted to put on, and Donald Trump cannot stop talking about. Recent reporting by PolitiFact, did you see this? Analyzed all of Trump's public events and speeches over the first 7 months of 2026. Here's what it said. Trump's remarks on the construction projects added up to nearly 45,000 words since January. He mentioned them at 84 events across 66 days, more than a quarter of all his public events during that period. In events where the construction projects came up, he's talked more about the projects than topics such as the economy and immigration. Just last night, Trump fired off a series of posts on Truth Social about the ballroom. Some of them were very, very long. In the posts, he mocked the National Trust for Historic Preservation. He called them treasonous. He claimed the military asked them not to bring the lawsuits against the ballroom, writing, and I quote, "But this did not deter them because they suffer from Trump derangement syndrome, commonly referred to as TDS." Trump loves to say his opponents have Trump derangement syndrome, but perhaps this is all a projection to hide a different kind of TDS. Trump decorating syndrome. The man cannot keep his hands off of a renovation. It started in the Oval Office. You remember the great golding of 2025. The ceiling seal, which originally looked like this. Now it's gold. A perfectly normal white door heading into the White House. Booyah. Gaudy gold trimmings. And a sign that says the Oval Office, just in case you forget where you are. Inside the Oval Office during the Biden days, the presidential portraits. There they are. Now, so much gold. Trump claims his style is inspired by Versailles Hall of Mirrors. You know, that's a great idea. Why not take inspiration from a famously out-of-touch regime? Let them eat diarrhea-inducing jalapenos. Next on his White House renovation rampage, Trump moved on to do what absolutely nobody does ever. See the grass of the White House Rose Garden and think, you know what, there should be some concrete there. And now there is, along with decorative chairs and tables and striped umbrellas, as if we're sipping a spritz on the Amalfi Coast. And of course, it is not just the White House. It's the reflecting pool. It is the Bizarro Arch. It is the $200 million ballroom. Oh, shoot. My bad. $300 million ballroom. Oh, wait. What? Shut the front door. The $900 million ballroom. That is the new, significantly larger price tag of the ballroom, according to the Washington Post. And remember, the Trump administration also said that the ballroom would be paid for entirely by private donors. Well, you know what? No dice. According to records obtained by the Washington Post, that receipt is being covered primarily by you, the taxpayer. There are also private donors to the project. Names that have been made public are a real who's who of who stands to benefit. A report entitled Ballroom Billions by the consumer advocacy group Public Citizen analyzed the names of the public donors and found this, quote, over half of corporate ballroom donors, 14 out of 27, have received new or increased government contracts over the last 6 months, totaling over $50 billion. I'll scratch your back if you scratch my ballroom. it's overwhelming. And it's tempting to get tired. It's tempting to dismiss this constant erosion of our norms and values and just give up. Until you take a step back to remember that these buildings mean something to the American people. Like when I visited the Kennedy Center in June and I met a woman named Madeline. What's your name?
Madeline.
Jacob.
Jacob.
Did you come to see the tarp?
Yes.
What does it make you feel to see that?
Ashamed. Ashamed that we let this happen. We're here for a funeral. And
Sorry to hear that.
The funeral this morning at Arlington, and the only other thing I wanted to do was to come here and look at that.
Really?
Yep.
Why was this so important for you to do?
Because my brother was a war hero, and we buried him this morning, and this is dedicated to someone who was so important in my life growing up, and for him to supersede that with his name is just obnoxious.
I'm very sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
This is no joke to a lot of people. This is no joke. One man's vanity overwhelming our nation's history.
President Trump capped off an alarming week for his Justice Department with a speech celebrating his record on crime during his first year back in office. It was at a police academy in New York on Friday, where the president promoted new FBI crime statistics showing a decrease in violent crime for 2025.
I'm thrilled to announce that the FBI has just released a new uniform crime report showing that in 2025, we achieved the single largest reduction in violent crime in American history. Every day I come to the White House, people are thanking me. Thank you, sir. Thank you. These gorgeous, beautiful girls, they want to be safe, and they come, Mr. President, may I speak to you? Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
You won't be surprised that he might not be telling the full truth, because actually, national violent crime rates have been declining since 2022 under former President Joe Biden in the aftermath of the pandemic. President Trump's speech comes days after newly confirmed U.S. Attorney General Todd Blanche promised the DOJ would uphold the Constitution.
We are going to, as we always do, defend the Constitution of the United States vigorously in court. We will always respect the role of the judiciary.
But Blanche made it a point to make at least one thing very clear.
And we're not going to be intimidated. We're not going to be intimidated out of enforcing the law or doing our jobs or executing the goals and priorities that we have in this administration.
And those priorities seem to be focused on Trump's desire to prosecute so-called vandals for damage to his renovations on the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool, with the White House asking the DOJ to consider new prosecution of the Olympian he accuses of vandalizing the reflecting pool. We've seen no evidence of this. That's after his own administration said there was no case there and that the damage was due to botched installation. Joining us now is Vanity Fair Washington correspondent Ada McLaughlin. He's back. And Dave Ehrenberg, former state attorney of Palm Beach County. Thank you both. Mr. State Attorney, I'm going to play some sound of Donald Trump during 2024 talking about crime stats, because you'd be surprised to find out he's talking a different tune now.
Joe Biden is out the other day trying to claim that crime is down, but actually crime is way up. They don't report crime properly anymore, as you probably have heard. Crooked Joe is citing statistics that no longer include data from 30% of the country, including the biggest and most violent cities. Crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof.
As you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But
Excuse me, the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud.
Mr. Ehrenberg, all of a sudden, the FBI's got it together. They're very good at putting these stats together. What are your thoughts?
Not surprising, Eugene. Now, first off, crime rates are complicated because there are a lot of factors that go into it, and politicians will take too much credit when crime is down and get too much credit get too much blame when crime is up. Now, remember when Trump put out a tweet in 2018 where he took credit for the lack of plane crashes, even though we haven't had one since 2009. So this is all par for the course. And crime is down, although not as much as he says. And so he can crow about it just like other politicians. I mean, mayors will take some credit for it. So we shouldn't be surprised. And with midterms approaching and his poll numbers down, it's politically smart for him to lean into this issue because he'd rather talk about this than inflation or Iran or ISIS performance or fake election fraud. This may be his last issue where he's not totally underwater. So I can expect him more to continue to do this. This is the showman that he is. This is what he's best at, PR, not as much when it comes to governing.
But is it dangerous? Is it concerning for you when you hear a president use stats like this? I just wonder, I'm just trying to think of what is the impact on the American people hearing these kinds of things, because then they have a completely different and warped view of the country that they live in. You know, we spent all of 2024 with him running, as we just played, talking about how crime was up and it was so terrible because black and brown people were killing everybody. It wasn't true then. It's not true now. And now you have a completely different view, but it changes the way that folks think about the country they live in.
Well, this is like when it comes to grocery prices. He can say that prices are down, but people can see and feel it with their own eyes and with their own brains. And so when he tells you that crime rates are at record lows, it just depends on where you are and how you feel. Do you feel safer right now? And so that's where his showman job doesn't really play as much, because this is an issue important to all Americans. And maybe this is where he should be politically. But keep in mind, crime rates have been going down for years. Since the pandemic, crime rates have dropped. So they were dropping before he got here, even under the Biden administration. So this is more about PR for Trump, and I think the public is on to him.
Hayden, let's talk about the newly installed Attorney General Todd Blanche. Blanche gave a really lofty, soaring speech to his Justice Department this week, talking about pursuing the law and how he welcomed diversity of opinion. And then he also makes remarks like, as we're not going to be intimidated out of enforcing the law or doing our jobs or executing the goals and priorities that we have in this administration. So on the one hand, he's kumbaya, and then on the other hand, he's vowing to do anything that is Trump's priority. So is this a new era with the Justice Department?
I think the second administration in general is a new era. I mean, I think Trump desperately wanted to avoid what he saw as the mistake he made in the first term, which is letting a special counsel be appointed, and vowed when he was out of office that when he did get back into power, that he would have a Justice Department that would work more closely with them. The thing that I can't get over is what that means in consequence is that we are wasting an enormous amount of time on absurd prosecutions like this 65-year-old canoeist that the Justice Department tried to prosecute for allegedly vandalizing the reflecting pool. And now, apparently, according to the Wall Street Journal, is considering misdemeanor charges against. It seems like when you put aside the more alarming aspects of the way the Justice Department has operated in the second term in terms of going after Trump's enemies, it's just everything that they're doing when it comes to the political prosecutions that they're pursuing just seem like an enormous waste of time. But the Justice Department feels, or at least the leadership of the Justice Department feels, that they need to satisfy President Donald Trump. And if that means targeting someone like this canoeist, so be it.
Speaking of waste of time, Dave, there is this news of Jeanine Pirro convening an unusual grand jury in D.C. that can focus on a single issue. This is according to reporting an exclusive scoop from the Washington Post this week from Perry Stein and Salvador Rizzo, that D.C. special grand jury is going to be overseen by Steven van der Velden, one of U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro's top allies in her office. It's unclear what the special grand jury will be tasked with probing, but those interviewed said it's a notable move, especially given Donald Trump's interest in prosecuting his adversaries. Now, we are heading into uncharted territory here as this article goes into. There's no known precedent for a special grand jury being convened in Washington, D.C., and that is because these special grand juries are usually used in bigger cities like New York or Texas, where they're pursuing more organized crime. There's also the fact that this could focus on a single case, or Pirro could decide to string together a number of cases and attack a variety of matters. Is there anything, Dave, that you can forecast about what we should expect with what Pirro's doing here? Or is this just another way for her to go after David Hearn?
It's another way for her to please Donald Trump because she's on the hot seat, because she did the right thing, albeit belatedly, when it came to David Hearn. We saw this with Tulsi Gabbard. Remember when she got in Trump's doghouse? She was next seen in a baseball cap in Fulton County trying to drum up fake election fraud claims. When I was state attorney in Palm Beach County, we had special grand juries convened to examine school safety after the Parkland massacre, to investigate fraud in the drug treatment industry. So they're not that unusual at the state level, although at the federal level, they are very uncommon. And against the background of a weaponized DOJ, I think it's right to be concerned about this. But keep in mind that the jury pool will be within D.C., and generally they have been passive-aggressive in the way that they have viewed the attempts of this administration to go after its enemies.
Passive-aggressive or aggressive?
Well, they refused to issue indictments, and you're dealing with Jeanine Pirro, who actually delivered an extensive pleading to the judge saying there is no claim on the reflecting pool. So I don't think that this is going to go anywhere. I think this is a way to please the president, but in the end, it's the same jury pools we had for other things in D.C., and they have been very critical of this administration.
Aidan McLaughlin and Dave Ehrenberg, thank you so much for starting your morning with us.
Back with me is the former Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, and there's so much I want to talk to you about, but the thing I think that's at the top of my list is that, you were a Naval Reserve intelligence officer, one of your many jobs over the years, and we have heard about just these awful conditions and the food shortages and the mental health crises on the Abraham Lincoln. I want to play Trump's response yesterday when he was pressed about it and get your reaction on the other side.
Family members of U.S. service members are concerned about the conditions on board the USS Lincoln.
Well, no, that ship is moving. No, they're not. That ship is moving right now, or very shortly, and it's being replaced with another very similar ship.
Has the deployment gone on too long?
No. Not nearly long enough.
He said not nearly long enough, Mr. Secretary.
He needs to show some respect to the troops that he is sending into harm's way, and he has done the opposite. The way he is talking about and, more importantly, treating military members and military families is completely unacceptable. When you sign up to serve, and I know what that's like, you do so knowing that the top of your chain of command, the Secretary of Defense, the President, maybe from this party or that party over the course of your military career, it's not supposed to matter because it's not about politics for you. But the way that it's happening right now is that they have sought to politicize the military. They have undermined the military in so many ways while claiming to do the opposite. Just yesterday in the airport, I had two different active duty troops come up to me talking about some of the pressure they feel that they're under and the distractions they're experiencing because of what's happening at the top of their chain of command, which just should not be their problem. And then to think of the actual conditions that these deployed sailors are going through. When you were in charge, when you were the commander-in-chief, the absolute least you could do is show some moral support for what they're going through. Even if this White House and this Pentagon are failing to shorten the historic record-breaking length of deployments, even if they are failing to improve the conditions on the ships, which, by the way, is unacceptable. But even if that's the case, the very least that they can and should do is show some regard for the sacrifice that those service members are making and demonstrate that they understand what they are being asked to do.
What is Secretary Hegseth's responsibility here in all of this, and what should the consequences be?
Well, look, he has failed this country and he has failed our troops time and time again. He's done that from the early days when he failed to protect classified information to this time when obviously on his watch, serious problems are happening affecting readiness and morale. They've been so busy pursuing culture wars and PT glow-ups, trying to look good at workouts, that he's obviously taken his eye off the ball of protecting our troops and making sure our warfighters are equipped to do their job.
I do want to ask you about your other gig as former Secretary of Transportation, because there's so much going on in that world that I want to ask you about. And here are just some of the headlines. Current Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy announced a campaign to recruit gamers to solve the ATC, air traffic control shortage. ICE going across airports. They're arresting immigrants with expired visas inside the airports. They've got a data sharing agreement with the TSA as well. Trump's been using federal funds to get infrastructure projects to bear his name, leveraging that and basically threatening to withhold it. What of all of this, what is the most troubling to you based on what you know about our transportation system, the infrastructure, and what we need right now?
Well, look, the focus of any Secretary of Transportation, Republican or Democrat, ought to be the safety, the integrity, and the efficiency of the U.S. transportation system. What we're seeing right now is yet another example of the kind of corruption that has so many people infuriated with the Trump administration. It's one of the reasons why this traditionally conservative district where I am today in Nevada is in play. When you see things like the president trying to condition funding for infrastructure projects that millions of people count on whether some station or tunnel or bridge or something gets named after him. Back in Michigan, where I live, they delayed the opening of a key international bridge to Canada, basically because a Trump super PAC donor got to a cabinet member and he was making a lot of money off the old way. When you hear stories like this infamous road trip of the secretary, which started out as just an embarrassment, and then it turned into an actual scandal because we learned that it was being financed by the very companies he regulates. And now there's a new rule coming out from the Department of Transportation that will make it easier for airlines to hide the true price of airfares. This is just the exact opposite of what it means to protect the American traveler, both in terms of focusing on their safety and in terms of making sure that as consumers, everybody is protected. And, you see a lot of frustrated travelers as a result.
Since you mentioned it, this ridiculous reality TV show, his family was going to road trip across the United States. It was supposed to air in June, and there's no sign of it. There are there's a nonprofit, I guess, that did this, and behind the funding is all of these different companies, Boeing and Toyota. They donated $1 million to it. Shell, United Airlines, the U.S. Travel Association, Chase Travel, Royal Caribbean. What the hell is going on there?
Look, in an era where the President of the United States and his family members can make $1 billion while in office from things like crypto deals, it's easy to just get used to this sort of thing from the highest levels down to a place like the DOT. But that doesn't mean it's okay. That doesn't mean it's normal. The road trip thing, they pulled it because originally it was just an embarrassment because it was a bad look for the secretary to be saying that road trips fit any budget at the exact moment when President Trump increased our gas prices with the Iran war. But what escalated it from an embarrassment to a scandal was this discovery that it's being paid for by companies that he regulates. This is not some nitpicking thing. This is fundamental question of integrity. Yeah. And the secretary's lack of integrity reflects the broader pattern of corruption that has so many people, including many people who voted for Trump, saying we can't have any more of this. We at least need to have some balance in Congress going into the next year.
It's been fascinating to watch you go across the country. You're packing venues as you go. You've been focused on saving the Democratic map, expanding it even in 2026 like there in Nevada. But level with me. How are you feeling about running for president in 2028? Where are you at?
I'm really trying to keep those conversations and those discussions in their place, which is after November. Obviously, lots of conversations about what comes next.
You got to be thinking about it, though. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's no secret, but the reality is so much depends on making sure we get Congress into the right hands. We have an opportunity to flip the Senate. We have an opportunity to flip the House, and we really need to make sure we're doing that. So I'm going everywhere that I can, campaigning with great candidates like Teresa Benitez Thompson, who I'm with today in Nevada, and just making sure that we connect with voters. Again, look, Republicans are in the middle of a very aggressive effort to tilt the maps. They can't persuade the voters, so they're trying to rearrange the voters. That makes it all the more important for us to be relentlessly focused on things like making life more affordable, getting people the economic security that they need, standing up to these tax breaks and corrupt favors going to the wealthiest people and the kinds of corporations that can donate to ballrooms and buy memberships at Mar-a-Lago. We have a chance to redirect the course of this country before it's too late. And while for all the obvious reasons, the commentators are already in 2028 mode, the simple reality is that we're living through a season that's going to be decisive in terms of what happens next in this decade. It is 80 days away. We got to do everything we can to make sure that we get these seats into the right hands.
Yep, we're watching closely. Keep us posted, if you will. That 2nd congressional district will be important should you decide to run for the President of the United States in 2028. Pete Buttigieg, former Transportation Secretary, I appreciate you being here. Thanks.
Same here. Appreciate being with you.
The Trump administration is dismissing concerns about the conditions on the USS Lincoln, even as the president confirms a new aircraft carrier is headed to the Middle East to relieve the approximately 5,000 sailors on that ship, which has been at sea for more than 240 straight days. As Navy families and lawmakers raise concerns about shortages of food and basic supplies and the deteriorating mental health of some of the sailors, the administration is accusing the media of misrepresenting the situation.
Completely misrepresented. Listen, we make sure that every ship, every crew, every captain has everything we can provide them at every single moment.
Family members of U.S. service members are concerned about the conditions on board the USS Lincoln.
Well, no, that ship is moving. No, they're not. That ship is moving right now, or very shortly, and it's being replaced with another very similar ship.
Has the deployment's gone on too long?
No. Not nearly long enough.
Joining me now, Allison Jaslow, retired U.S. Army captain and Iraq war veteran and former CEO of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, and Kevin Barron, president of Elevation Global Strategies and former executive editor of Defense One. I'm glad to have you both here. Allison, where is the disconnect between the administration's view of the sailor situation and their reported experience? Are the president and Secretary Hegseth taking this seriously?
I mean, I think it's for the public to assess whether they're taking it seriously or not. I know that what is being reported is the feelings of family members. They're also relaying, word from their loved ones who are on board the USS Lincoln. And I think, most importantly, there's been a real struggle to have, members of the press both get the access that they need to do quality reporting, both in the Pentagon, but also be embedded with troops abroad. And I think if we had, reporters who could see with their own eyes on the deck of the USS Lincoln right now, we wouldn't have to be, dealing with hearsay and he said, she said between the Secretary of Defense and military families.
Kevin, the New York Times reports this entire situation stems from an Iranian retaliatory attack on a U.S. base in Bahrain in the first days of the war, which damaged a key logistics hub for the USS Lincoln. You've covered U.S. military deployments for years. Does this indicate a lack of planning to accommodate an attack like this by the administration? I mean, what has gone wrong here?
What's gone wrong? A lot has. Yes, it clearly is a bad planning because they never want to be in this position to begin with. Look, when the United States goes to war, you expect that the war is something that will be, the ending is not known. It could go on forever. It could go on for an uncertain amount of time. And the military bakes that into their system they have for years. Like you said, aircraft carriers are meant to stay at sea for a long time, and there's plenty of capability to get them equipped and stocked up with the supplies they need. But some things need to come to port. And so, yes, the nature of this conflict has exposed all kinds of things that clearly the White House and the Pentagon didn't prepare for, or didn't care about worrying about them when those consequences would happen. Like all of the strikes, not just at Bahrain, but all of the military facilities in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. It has now been it's clear they are within striking range of Iranian missiles, and that's not ending. So the White House, he absolutely put themselves into this position by going to war so quickly and not preparing for a 6-month-long aircraft carrier deployment.
So that hearsay we just were talking about, Allison, MS Now spoke to the wife of a sailor who jumped off the USS Lincoln last week. He was in the water for about an hour or so before he was rescued. And the wife, who was granted anonymity to describe sensitive mental health issues, says she was not contacted by Navy officials until 4 days later. But one of the last text messages she received from her husband read, I think the boat is finally getting to me, and I really don't think I can keep up my peace act anymore. You were right about it all not being okay. We were supposed to leave Fifth Fleet on July 15th, but then something had to come up, and my last hope of being home soon was gone. I'm really trying to not feel negative or hopeless, but between the Wi-Fi and not knowing when I will come home and not knowing what is happening back at home, it's really getting to me. I don't think I can do another deployment after this, and I don't even know if I can finish this deployment. So, Allison, the wife says that her husband tried to raise his mental health concerns up the ship's chain of command, but he was brushed off. How should Navy commanders be handling this situation?
Well, first of all, Alex, I'd like to acknowledge your colleague who did incredible reporting on the specific aspect of what's happening on the USS Lincoln.
Yeah.
One of the things that really disappointed me about this reporting as somebody who has led troops in wartime is that there's always an imperative, whether you lose somebody, they're killed in action or injured, to quickly get word to their loved ones. Because the last thing you want, and I think what happened in this instance, is for somebody to hear from somebody who's other than a uniformed military personnel as to the condition of their loved one who is abroad. And of course, it's definitely concerning that, it sounds like this service member was raising alarm bells about his mental health and not getting the care that he needed on board the ship. But more importantly, when he made the tragic decision to go overboard, his family should have been notified very quickly. And I actually hope that it's investigated as to why the command didn't more aggressively address the situation and making sure the next of kin knew what was happening on the ship.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning Priya Sridhar, too. She is a rock star of a reporter. But, Kevin, President Trump's comments about the carrier not being out there nearly long enough, they seem to align with his plans to continue the blockade in the Strait. This from someone who deferred his own military service 5 times and never served. But with the USS Washington heading to the Middle East, can the U.S. ensure that the next round of sailors won't endure similar conditions? Is the U.S. prepared to extend this blockade indefinitely, as Trump suggested this week?
Well, there's a lot there. I think a lot of these comments from Trump and Hegseth, I just don't take them seriously. I've seen the replay many times of Trump making that quip, and I can't tell if he's saying he doesn't think that the troops have been deployed long enough on that ship, or if he just thinks the war hasn't gone on long enough because we got to keep fighting. But it all just kind of reflects the bit of a callousness and how unusual it is for leaders like Hegseth and defense secretaries to speak this way when these kinds of wrongs are exposed through the press and make their way up the chain of command. I was on air yesterday with Leon Panetta when he was secretary. I covered like 8 defense secretaries. And every time there was a news report that would reveal mold on the base or some problem with military families, especially when it came to families, almost always the secretary or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, whoever got that information through the news would say, I saw these reports and we're going to do something about it. And we're going to look into it and make sure it doesn't happen again and play with that way. It's not an immediate attack on the press. So it's hard to know how much how much that the leadership, the political leadership like a Hegseth takes this seriously. A Hegseth who was a soldier but was never the manager of a cabinet level department of the U.S. government, has never had to deal with a war like this with this kind of, with these personalities and this kind of extension and uncertain future from the White House. We just don't know. Yes, the war could go on as long as the president of the United States wants it to go on. I think most people look at this war and think that it'll stop the minute that Trump stops fighting back, that the Iranians have a card. They figured out that as long as they don't need every missile in the world or nuclear capabilities to keep this war going. All they need is one drone to hit one ship in the Strait, and now they can poke the bear, Trump, and he's fighting back with even bigger firepower. So we're in this cycle. Until a lot of people think until Trump says, we're not going to fight back anymore, we're going to get out of this and cut his losses or call it wherever he wants, it's just going to keep going on. So we can just hope that the next carrier on its way is better equipped, that the supply chain is ready to go, that they've figured out alternatives, because that strait is going to be closed for a long time. And again, every single one of those bases that has been proven now that the Iranians can hit them with missiles, hit them with drones. They've changed the calculus of the United States forward deployed military in the Middle East for as long as we can tell.
Allison, what should members of Congress be asking the DOD as it investigates the situation on the carrier? Who should be held accountable?
Well, obviously, there's a lot of questions about how conditions on the carrier are being managed right now. But I think, to one of Kevin's points earlier, this ship, deployed in November. This was a ship that was going out on a typical rotation to sea. It's before we invaded Venezuela and before we launched attacks on Iran. And I think the broader question for the Department of Defense and the Commander-in-Chief is, are we preparing for these prolonged conflicts that we're getting ourselves into? Because I think the cascading effects of not preparing adequately is what you're seeing festering on the USS Lincoln right now. And so obviously, there's a saying in the military, mission first, people always. We always have to take care of our people, which is not just taking care of their mental health, making sure that they're fed well, making sure that they have, what other, care that they need on the ship that they're not getting right now because of logistics issues, but also clarity of mission. And so I think from the top down, from the Pentagon to the USS Lincoln or the George Washington, we need to have oversight from Congress to make sure that what's being managed across the globe not only is being managed well, but also with an eye towards the threats of the future, too. We are actively watching our military force, not just the people, but also our equipment being degraded before our eyes. And we have to be really concerned about what that means about threats in the Pacific, for example.
Yeah. Allison Jaslow, Kevin Barron, guys both, thank you so much.